and I'm about to interview a very inspiring woman called Clare Coffield. Clare is a leadership specialist and inspirational life coach who emigrated to Australia 5 years ago. She was giving a talk on the topic of training our brain when she had a stroke, literally as she was speaking to her audience and writing on the whiteboard. She managed to finish her presentation and was sent straight to hospital in an ambulance. And what they discovered was that she'd had such a serious brain bleed that half of her body was paralysed and it could have been fatal. So being someone who completely understands the power of the mind and our attitude, Clare took complete responsibility for her complete healing. 20 months later, she is walking independently and has again the full use really of her right arm, which was paralysed. How she achieved this is inspiring to say the least, which is why I wanted to share her story with you after meeting her just a few weeks ago. Clare, welcome.
Hello there, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, and looking forward to you sharing what you shared with me briefly when we caught up at that writers' event. So, tell us, Clare, what was it? There you are, up on stage, talking to an audience about, ironically, the brain,
Yes.
and you're having a stroke. How was it that you knew you were having a stroke, or what was your experience? What were others observing?
Interesting question, because I didn't know I was having a stroke. I had no idea. I had no pain. I didn't have the usual, facial droop. I didn't have any of that. I felt a bit lightheaded, but I was excited giving a presentation. What I did notice was my right leg wasn't moving, so I was getting stuck to the floor, and I was beginning to get a little bit confused. And my handwriting on the flip chart was going down at an angle. Apart from that, I just thought, oh, I'll deal with that later. I didn't think it was anything serious at all.
Wow.
Not at all.
So who did? How was it, picked up that something was happening?
Well, fortunately for me, my daughter-in-law, Jo, was in the audience. Now, she's a doctor, and she saw the change in me and kind of signaled to me, Claire, you need to sit down. And I said, I'll be a minute. You just give me a minute. I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. And she said, no, I need you to sit down. So I sat down and I was just still talking to people and just finishing up and giving out prizes and doing all sorts of things. And it was within minutes, the whole of my right side just collapsed in paralysis. And she was on the phone and got an ambulance straight away. Within minutes, she got an ambulance. Saved my life that night, absolutely.
Right. So what happened at the hospital and immediately after? What was your experience for that next stage?
Okay, so I just thought, oh, well, they're taking me in for a checkup to see what's going on. I had no idea what stroke meant. I had no knowledge, no information. Not something that I ever thought would happen to me because I was pretty fit and healthy, doing well. And the doctor told me I'd had a stroke, and I thought, well, I don't know what that means. I had no idea. But I really did think I was just there for a checkup, and I'd be home the next morning. And 3 months later, before I got home.
Wow!
So
3 months in hospital.
Yeah. So you go out to do a talk and you don't see your home for all those months. You couldn't imagine it. The shock was incredible. So that lack of knowledge, I just hadn't a clue what was happening to me. Not a clue.
And so what did the doctors say? Did they make have any thoughts about what the future was going to be like for you? What impression did they give you?
They really don't give much detail because there are two different kinds of stroke. All happens in the brain, and one is a blood clot, which I didn't have. I had the more rare one, the hemorrhage, so the brain bleeds, which can be fatal. And they really just said to me, you've had a stroke and we'll do what we can to help you. But they really don't give you very much information. But to be honest, at that time, it's so critical. You're not receptive to much information.
Mm-hmm.
You're in shock.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a complete bombardment of your mental processes and your body. I couldn't take in what they were telling me. So what they might have told me detail, but I was not able to receive it.
Yeah.
It was such because of the
So
shock.
when you arrived home 3 months later, what was your capacity? What were you able to do or not do? Could you walk or?
I had a walking frame, so I wasn't walking independently. Um, I was still getting therapies from the hospital, so my physio would come and visit me. They would come and collect me and take me to hydrotherapy.
Right.
So those two helped. So there was a lot of ongoing help from the hospital, from the Royal Talbots in Melbourne. So the treatment was excellent. So there had to be a lot of ongoing support once I got home.
Right. Okay.
I had to learn to cook a meal again. So I started off with getting Meals on Wheels, which quite honestly, I wasn't that crazy about. So I had that for a little while, and then I thought, I really want to improve my nutrition. So I started getting Hello Fresh, you know that company, so that all the contents of the meals come in a box. So I did that for a few months, and then eventually I started cooking, but I couldn't do that immediately. All of the kind of things we take for granted, like cooking and washing and showering and all those things, having a bath, that took me about 6 months to have a bath. But I did have showers.
Oh, that's good to know.
And brushing your teeth with your other hand and all these things. Oh, I had to relearn everything from scratch.
Are you left-handed or right-handed?
Oh, no. I was right-handed.
Okay.
I'm right-handed. So of course you get your stroke on your dominant side. Now that'd be too easy if it was the other side.
So did you learn to write left-handed?
Yes, I did, and it was all at an angle. And that came back reasonably quickly. But one of my first things that I wanted to do in hospital, so very early on, was write down the experience that I was having. I felt compelled to write it down. So yes, I was doing that with my left hand to begin with.
Wow.
And then my son brought me my laptop, and I started to learn again to use my right hand.
Yeah. Okay. So I remember being very inspired when we first met by your story of how you managed this healing, because I think you've had an extraordinary healing from someone who was quite paralyzed and had to walk with a frame to someone who in a fairly short space of time, under a couple of years, is now able to go from being nearly dying to being able to walk independently and have that use of both hands again. So and that side of your body, and you certainly don't look. Your face looks even, like you look very balanced, and you look great. So what do you think were your magic power tools here, right? Like what was it that you did that enabled your healing?
Okay, the very first thing that came instinctively to me was my language.
Okay.
So it was how I talked to myself. Now, when you that critical condition, you have no power, you have no influence. Everything is just happening all around you. So for me, the one element of control I had was what I was thinking about myself and how I talked about myself. So the therapist would say to me, "Come on, Claire, move your bad leg," when they were retraining me.
Yep.
And I would say, "I haven't got a bad leg." Because for me, that took me back to my upbringing of a strict Catholic upbringing. And if you were bad, you'd done something wrong. And I thought, I haven't done anything wrong. I've had a stroke. It just happens. So I said to them, I haven't got a bad leg. So they were rolling their eyes. And I said, I've got a learning leg. And my other leg is a supporting leg.
I love that.
So, and I felt that I was taking an element of control where everything else was just happening around me. And it really did empower me to choose my own language and insist that people didn't call my affected leg a bad leg.
Yeah.
I mean, they would say things like, if you're going up and down stairs, your good leg goes up to heaven and your bad leg goes down to hell. And I said, don't say that to me. That doesn't work for me. Just cut it out.
Yeah.
Well, I just refuse to accept this terminology.
Yeah, well, good for you, and obviously this has really served you. This is the story that made me think I have to interview you, and there were a few more things that you said. For example, and it's another thing about language was the way that you spoke to your arm. Would you share that story?
Oh, absolutely. So I've got two beautiful little granddaughters. They're now 4 and 9, and they are just the light of my life, as you can imagine. And I think it was about day 2, I was thinking, how am I treating this side of my body that's been affected so badly? How am I going to talk to it? And I thought, I'm going to talk to my body like I do to my granddaughters. So I would lift my arm and I would stroke it and I would say, come on, darling, you'll be okay. Sweetheart, we'll get through this together. Now that's what I would say to my little granddaughters. But I'd also lift my arm and start kissing it. Because there's loads of kisses and cuddles with the grandchildren. And I thought, why would I do that with the little girls and not give that love to myself? Now, I've never done anything like that to myself before, but in that situation, I just thought, let's see what happens. And I never had any anger about the paralysis, whereas I know some people do. And I just thought, I'm going to love this and treat it and support it and tell it it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe that mindset really set me up for recovery. With all the other support, of course, all the medics and all the other support that I had from family and so on. But for me, that was a powerful way of taking an element of control over my recovery.
Yeah.
And for me, it worked. It worked.
Well, I was again moved to tears just then hearing you tell that story, that love and acceptance that you gave to your arm. It's actually not unlike something I do. I teach a creative writing class, and I talk about the creative process, and that it's very much about, in order to facilitate the flow of ideas, we have to have that trust and kindness and loving reception of the ideas and trust of ourselves and our ideas. And we're so used to being critics and cutting ourselves down off at the knees, you know what I mean? So I can really relate, and I think that's brilliant. You told me also about a woman who had a stroke as well, who was in the hospital with you, who had a very different attitude. So share about that, please.
I don't think her approach is unusual. It's just not the one that I chose. So we're still in touch all these months later, and I love her to bits. We just have a different approach to what happened to us and how we're going to recover. She's doing very well. We are different, and that's the thing about stroke patients. We are all individuals and very different how we react to this. So her approach is, all she wants is things to be back the way they were before the stroke. She just wants her life back, untouched, unmessed up. And my approach to that is, well, if I wanted my life to be back to where it was before the stroke, what is coming is a stroke. Because you can't change the past. We can change what we do in the future, but you can't change that's a fact that is now imprinted on me. But if I go back there, that's what I get. So I don't want that. Why would I want another stroke?
Absolutely. This was another thing that you said to me in that brief conversation we had. I went like, oh my goodness, this woman is so switched on. And that's such a wonderful, intelligent way to respond to this, that who you were before the stroke was the person in the process of creating the stroke. And
Yes.
you know, and it has served you. It hasn't been a disaster, it's been a blessing in your life because it woke you up. It had you see things you needed to see to create changes.
Yes.
This is a
Yeah.
beautiful segue into something you've blogged about, which is your reflection on what did cause the stroke. So, would you share about that a bit, please?
Sure. Yes. I mean, this has been a great opportunity to reflect on, well, what led up to the stroke. Now, hereditary factors, that's a big one. So I've got a father and an elder brother who both had strokes, and a maternal grandmother. So, but I thought, well, that was their lives, nothing to do with me. It never occurred to me that I could possibly have a stroke. So my take on this is, when I've been honest with myself and looked back over all the decades, I've faced a lot of major emotional traumas in my life, like 2 divorces. Let's take those. And I would face up to them and deal with them, I thought, by pushing through, gathering your strength and your courage and pushing through, but not actually understanding or dealing with it. So you would push through it and leave it behind. So for me, I think all these different traumas through stress at work and all sorts of crazy things that have happened over the decades, it's had a cumulative effect on my body. And eventually my body said, we've had enough. We're not carrying you any longer. So I was stopped in my tracks because I was allowing these things to go on and on in my life without me really making the major changes that if I'd done 30, 40 years ago, I may not have had a stroke. Who knows? But I've got quite a clear view that it wasn't a once off, or that was a stressful night. It was over decades, the
Mm.
stress had been building up. And eventually, my body said, I think you're strong enough to deal with this now. Wham, down you go.
Mm.
Because if I'd had a stroke 20 years ago, emotionally, I wouldn't have been strong enough. It would have wiped me out.
Right. Well, that's another really interesting way of looking at it, that you actually get the stroke as a reward for being strong, you know? That's
I
amazing.
thought of it that way.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? So what you were saying just then about the genetic element, that there are strokes in the family, is one thing, but I've heard a very interesting thing about that we can look to genetics to sort of say, well, I couldn't do anything about it because it was it was in my genes. But on the
Yeah.
other hand, people like Don Tolman, a health educator, has said that we don't necessarily inherit the disease, but we inherit the lifestyle, the patterns. So you may
Right.
well have inherited what your family did of just pushing things under the carpet and not dealing with them. And as you've said, doing that long term,
Yeah.
you end up in strife.
Yes. Yes.
So
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah, so wow, what
And,
a
and the thing for me was that I knew that my family had had strokes, but when I look at their lifestyle, overweight, um, smokers, drinkers. Now, I've always liked my white wine until now, because I've had to cut back on that vastly. But looking at my family, I thought, well, I'm not overweight. I'm healthy. I'm happy in Australia. So
mm,
it it was like, that's them. That's not my life.
mm,
They're not the choices I've made, and yet it still happens.
yes. So there's a whole lot more that you share in your blog, and so I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'll have you give your website, blog, whatever information you'd like to give, so that people can reach out to you. And that is to tell us a little bit about what you were doing in business and what you're doing now, what's coming up for you in the future. So just tell us a little bit about Clare Coffield, the leadership and coach and inspirational life coach.
Okay, so back in England when I started my business of course, I started it in the recession,
Right.
and I was training childcare managers in leadership and management to help them get their first qualification. And I absolutely loved that. That was great. So when I came over to Australia 5 years ago, I carried on with the leadership training and did a lot of training work for other companies. And I was coaching people one-to-one, middle managers, mostly females, on how to deal with stress and time management, those kind of things. So now that I've had this experience, my life has taken a completely different, not completely different, but a different track in that I'm now giving talks on resilience. I'm giving talks on taking responsibility for our health instead of relying on the doctor to fix us. And I'm writing a book on resilience. And really all the experiences that I've had to share some ideas that if people even pick up on one thing, like the language thing or visualization or whatever, anything that's going to give them a bit of hope that they can have an input into their recovery and that they don't have to wait for other people to come along and sort it all out for them. So it's got to be a collaboration with other people, but we can take a massive amount of responsibility ourselves. So my future now, I've got speaking engagements. Hopefully I'll be doing my book signing.
Yes, well, we met at a book writers event, didn't we?
Yes. So that's a completely different direction that I'm very, very excited about. And I feel as though it's a different purpose in my life. Because in the past, I would be looking at my bank statement at the end of the month and thinking, what new contracts can I get? Now, over the last 20 months, I've done very little work, paid work, because that is not, at the moment, that has not been my driving force. So that's a very strange thing for me to say because, I'm single, I need to survive financially, but I'm confident that the future will provide that financial security because I'm going on this path that I absolutely feel has got real purpose and real value. And I'm confident that I'm going to go into being published author, which I could never have said before, and I'm excited about what the possibilities could be.
Well, your credentials as far as inspiring people and supporting people in taking responsibility and transforming health issues or other aspects of their lives where they've been burying issues and not dealing with them is clearly, you have glowing credentials here. So, Claire, thank you very much for taking the time to share your story with me and with my community, the people who are interested in the work that I do. I really take my hat off to you. I think that's very inspiring, and the love that you've shown your body, your kindness to your body, it just goes to show that we reap rewards when we are kind and loving to ourselves in that way. And I hope many of you watching this interview and listening will take this to heart and apply it in your lives and share this interview with others. So, Claire, if you could share how people can reach you, if you've got a blog or an email, a website or something.
Okay, so my business is called Clarity in Your Life. So it's www.clarityinyourlife.com. Email is claire@clarityinyourlife.
And do you want the phone? I was just going to say, and that is Claire spelt CLARE for
it's
people.
No I.
Yep.
No I.
which is beautiful, isn't it? Because obviously Claire means clear, so it's a lovely business name to have.
Yes.
And you were about to give your phone number.
Yes. So mobile is 042 1141 955.
Thank you again, Claire. So do have a look at Claire's website, and if you'd like to know more about me, It's www.themasteryclub.com. Thank you. Create yourself a wonderful week.